Well, this is it, the final episode reviewing for AP Micro. So let's get you guys started. Before we get started, today's going to be a very short day. So if I can have 15 minutes of your attention, the rest of the day is yours, or evening, or if you're watching this at 3 in the morning because you just got done playing COD, whatever it is. First of all, to all of you young lads and laddies around the world who have emailed, thank you for all the kind words. It truly means a lot. And you guys know, if you have questions, feel free to shoot me an email. If you can't figure them out, not a problem at all. And as I said earlier, those of you who've watched these and watched most of them, I would love to know how you did. Just shoot me your name and score. Put my email up here in just a second. But thank you, because they've been great. I've enjoyed interacting with you. And, you know, I know that there's always stuff done during the year for teachers, but there should be like a students appreciation week. And I've truly appreciated those of you who've reached out, and some of your questions are very in depth and really challenging questions. So they've been fun to interact with you guys. Thanks to Morgan and Thea and Jalen and Rory of all my students. You four have kept me on my toes during these videos by texting me saying, hey, dummy, your camera's not on, or let's get the video going type thing. So I do thank you for that. Today, let's get right into this thing and let's get some tips. So I'm going to go through a couple different things, some tips, and then what graphs do you have to know? So there's the email. The scores will be a little late. They're probably not going to be around July 5th like normal, probably a week and a half later, because by the time all of us read these, right, the tests are a little bit later anyways. And so things will be a little delayed. So, you know, if it's July 14th and you've gotten your scores, don't be alarmed, okay? And don't bother, right? Trevor Packer on Twitter asking when the scores come out. They're coming out. So first of all, let me go through 10 things really brief with you guys. I'm not going to spend time diving into each one of these and unpacking them. I just want to go through these so you guys have them. First of all, we've talked about this, right? All of these we've talked about throughout the last 30-something videos. And I always say to you guys, when you see a free response question, the first thing you should say, what is the question asking me and what do they want me to know, right? Because there's different ways of looking at this. If you see words like explain, right, you got to type away or write away your explanation. If it's define, they want a definition of something. And remember, like allocated efficiency, the definition can be it's where marginal benefit equals marginal cost, or it's where price equals marginal cost. That's a definition. That's okay. Indicate. Indicate means increase, decrease, right? Demand increase. That's an indicate. So read those carefully. I know some of you are like nervous because, you know, Mr. Packer was out there on Twitter saying, hey, just to let you know, they're going to be long. And if you don't answer all the parts, you can still get a 5. Don't fret. That's good news. That's just more points for you to be able to get. Think about it that way. Number 2, when you see a question, always differentiate. Are they asking about firms or are they asking about markets? Yesterday, when they asked about that in the beginning and it said like productivity gains or something like that, and it affected the Pete Joyce, I think it was, if that was the question. Yeah. Technological breakthrough. Remember, that was a firm, right? They're asking about her marginal cost decreasing. And once you know that, then you say, all right, draw that on the graph. Oh yeah, it hits marginal revenue at a higher quantity. If they're asking about markets, you go back to supply and demand. Number 3, all right, I'm not going to list them all. You guys have watched videos. I've told you, you're probably going to have to know this one. You're going to have to know this one. That's not what today's about. But know your formulas. This is not going to be a math test, but you have to be able to do your elasticity formulas, your margin utility divided by price of one good has to equal margin utility divided by price of the other good. How do I get MRP? All these things. So is there a lot of formulas? No, of course not, right? And there's nothing too in depth, but know your formulas, how to find your per unit tax, those kind of things. Allocated efficiency is the number one thing probably in the last 33 days that we've talked about. Almost every single video, there's been a question, is the market currently allocatively efficient or not? Why is this important? We call it socially optimal as well. Why is that important? Where is it on the graph? Why is a monopoly not allocatively efficient, right? Because your price is greater than your marginal cost. Understand why firms set quantity MC and MR, and you're halfway there. If you can understand that concept. Number 5, when you see a question about things like tax and subsidies, what is the difference between a per unit and a lump sum? Okay, so a per unit tax and a lump sum tax, these are important things to know. And so make sure on your graphs, right, if they ask what happens to marginal costs if you rent a fixed cost increase, right? Well, fixed costs don't affect these things, right? So you're saying like a lump sum subsidy, but per units do, they're shifting marginal cost. Number 6, big one, is probably going to be asked. I will tell you right now, I know there's a number of teachers and there's some great websites out there, right? Refonomics, some of you use. Jacob Reed has a great one. ACDC, Clifford does great work with his, Jacob does. And I know a lot of people are saying, if we had to predict, we teachers do this all the time. If the students in my class, the 85 kids that I have in AP, if they were sitting in my class today, which we should be, wish we were, of course, and I would have on the board, I predict this, this, and this. But keep in mind, because this year is so different, don't just go based on us. So if we say, I think there could be a game theory, don't say, I'm just going to study that. We don't know. They're going to be such long questions. So make sure things like this, if I had to predict, there seems to be a lot of questions about economic profit, accounting profit, right? Know how to differentiate the two. Number 7, keep in mind, if they ask you to put a price floor or price ceiling on a graph, is it binding? If it's not, it doesn't interfere with the marketplace. Be careful of that. We talked about that back when we talked about price ceilings and price floors. Number 8, a number of you have emailed me saying, one of my favorite emails was when I took the first practice test, I could hear your voice in my head saying, make your columns. When you see total columns, make your marginal columns, marginal product, marginal benefit, marginal utility, those kind of things. Once you do that, right, you can sit there and write them down. And then everything's just going to work out. You're going to find diminishing return, marginal returns and MRP and the quantity you're going to hire and all those kind of things. Number 9, how do you get MRP, right? So it's marginal product times price in a perfectly competitive labor market. And what are the things that shift this? So what shifts the supply of labor? What shifts the demand for labor, your MRP? Know those kind of things. And last but not least, all right, at the end of this whole thing this journey that we've been on, and some of you have been on it with me every day, which is awesome. And we appreciate that. So the question is, well, we don't have to know graphs. Well, no. Of course you have to know graphs. I intentionally, when I tried to set up the practice test with you guys, I wanted to make sure I had graphs on both days, because if I had to guess, you're going to see graphs. It's not just going to be a written test, obviously. No, you don't have to draw them, but you certainly have to know, what am I looking at? Is that monopolistic in the long run? How do I do game theory? Those kind of things. So I'm not going to spend time drawing these. We've done this. Today is not a day to spend 2 hours going over this. Today is to get you guys fired up, amped up to do wellness. Here is the sheet that I use with my students. So if you're watching from Chelsea High School, you've done this. I make my students posters. They fold them into 16 squares. They're huge posters. We do macro on one side and micro on the other. I know all of my students have these hanging in their bedroom right next to the bed. So when they wake up, which is sadly around noon, most of them, the first thing they do is they open their eye and they pick one graph a day and they say, today I'm going to learn about tax graphs, and boom, they look at the graph, they talk about it. It's wonderful. I had a student once about washable markers, and every day in the shower, he would draw 2 econ graphs. Spectacular, right? The nerdiness is awesome. So here are the graphs. If you need to go back and pause this, these are the graphs that we've gone through. These are the graphs I could ask, right? Externalities, not going to be on the test this year, so you can get those off Lorenz curve, things like that, not on it. But this stuff, now, is this every single possible point? No, of course not. That's not what my intent is not, hey, but for the most part, these are the graphs you guys are going to have to know right here. So your basic supply and demand, your production possibility, which I didn't list because for the most part, right, you guys know your PPC graph. We've done that enough. These are the kind of the more in-depth ones. So your supply and demand, your pricings, your perfectly competitive, your monopolies, right? You'll notice on here the monopoly graph. These are all the points that you guys have to know. So when you're looking at a monopoly graph, what I would recommend is when you draw it, make it large, go through, and every time you draw a cost curve, so let's say you have your demand and marginal revenue, stop right there and say to yourself, okay, now could they ask me a question about this? Yes. So the question, of course, why is demand greater than marginal revenue? When in a perfectly competitive firm, demand equals marginal revenue. Remember Mr. DARP, right? And remember, Mr. does not equal DARP in imperfectly competitive, but if they are a perfectly competitive firm, then Mr. joins the party. Little tips, these little things you can go through in your brain. So you would say, why is demand greater than marginal revenue? That's right. To increase output, the monopolist would have to lower the price on all previously sold units or all units sold. Then you draw a marginal cost curve. Okay. So when marginal cost crosses marginal revenue, is that, oh yeah, that's profit maximizing, or sometimes they call it loss minimizing, same thing, right? Okay, let's continue on that. It just crossed my demand curve. Is that something? Oh yeah, my demand curve is all the prices. And if marginal cost crosses price, that is allocatively efficient. Then draw on your average total cost. I know I've said it 1,000 times. Make sure your marginal cost goes through the very bottom. Is that important? Yes, that's productively efficient. What about where average total cost crosses your demand curve? Oh yeah, that's fair return or break-even price. Wait a minute. I remember I forgot to go where marginal revenue crosses my x-axis, because when marginal revenue is 0, that's where the firm maximizes total revenue. And what else is it? Oh, that's right. If I make my dotted lines up, everything to the left of that is demand is elastic, and then everything down to the right, the larger quantities, demand is inelastic, and right at that point, it's unit elastic. All of those points, all you've done is drawn 4 lines, and now you could talk so much about that. So if there's a monopoly graph, and it says A through L or A through N, and you're like, oh my gosh, look at all these. What are you talking about? That's great, because you just drew this the day before. You know all these points. You're going to be golden. You're going to do great on this. Factor markets, I would know your labor graphs, the side-by-side, why in a firm is the supply of labor or your marginal factor cost horizontal, right? Why is it perfectly elastic? That's right. They're wage takers. The wages found out in the marketplace. What shifts that? What shifts your firm's demand for labor? A monopsony. You never know. It's been since 2011, the international exam. So it's been 9 years since there was a monopsony on the free response. But guess what? There's been monopsony on multiple choice. So it's not like they haven't, there's not like they haven't asked kids about monopsonies. Could they? Of course they could. Would I spend an hour doing it? No. Look over your monopsony, figure out why the quantity is lower than a normal market and why the wage is lower than a normal market, right? We talked about it. You can go back and watch those like 5.4. And I know that a lot of teachers, myself included, during these videos, I might say like, oh, that's, we're in unit 4. And I know what you guys say. I don't care what unit is. I get that. But if you know, as teachers, we keep saying it's units 1 through 5, as long as you can go through on the AP website and say, all right, what exactly is in 1 through 5? And then if you say, oh my goodness, every single time we talk about monopolistic competition, right? That differentiate word, right? Whatever, I know it's easy, but you could go right in there and say that's in unit 4, boom, and then watch unit 4 video that's already posted on here, right? Because it seems like more people are watching them now as we get closer to the video. It's almost like teenagers are waiting until the last minute to start watching these videos. It is the most bizarre phenomenon. Total revenue test. I'm going to harp on this thing. I did it in my videos. When they're asking about the elasticity of demand, it's total revenue test. And a lot of times you can do that instead of doing the math. So if the price increases and you can do the price and quantity, just if price increases and total revenue increases, demand is inelastic, right? If the arrows go opposite each other, demand is elastic. Payoff matrix. So game theory, and I know I've talked to a couple of you guys who are my students, and you're like, it'd be spectacular if we had a game theory question. So easy. Not only is it a matter of going through and circling which one, but it's also saying, now if they change this, or if they collude, what would they do? That can change the question a little bit and make it more in-depth. So know those things. I talked about those in the videos. Economies of scale, diseconomies of scale. I know this is one of the hardest things in the world. Remember, that's your long-run average total cost curve. It's looking at firms moving in the long run. Natural monopolies experience economies of scale. Why? Why do firms experience diseconomies of scale? Why do some firms have constant long-run average total cost? What do these things mean? We talked all about that in the video. And then the last graph is your trade graph. It's been a while since there's been a trade graph. This year would be a wonderful year to put a trade graph on here. And if you have a trade graph, what I would do is either have 2 graphs and put one with free trade, like an importing nation, and then one with an exporting nation. So how much do you import and export? And then if you don't want to do another one, just on the importing graph, put a tariff. Not on the exporting, that'd be a bad idea. On the importing graph, put a tariff right above it. Then go through and say, where are my deadweight losses? What happened to consumer surplus before the tariff, after, producer surplus? Where's the tax revenue box, right? So if you guys go through these and you're just like, write down this list and you're like, oh man, I got this thing. That's why we did these videos. So listen, take a huge deep breath. I think you guys are going to do great on these. I think if you put some time in studying, right? What's today? The 8th. So what do we have, like 12 days? That's plenty of time. I know I'm starting to sound like you guys, but truly that's plenty of time. And study. For those of you who are my students, study Mac too. You better be watching those videos because we didn't get through all of Mac before we had to leave. But this has been an absolute joy and an absolute pleasure. A very humbling experience to be asked to do this. So I hope you guys do outstanding. I'm rooting for all of you who've been watching these videos. I want you all to go out there and just knock it out of the park and get your college credit. So I have faith in all of you. I really do. There's the 5 tips. We've put this up before. I would go through, make sure you've done these, but truly good luck. I truly believe in you guys. I think you all have this. I think you're going to do outstanding. So if you guys need anything, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Not a whole lot going on. You know, Michigan extended their stay-homer until May 28th. So it looks like I have time to answer some emails. So if you guys have questions, best of luck to all of you. Let's go out and do well on this test. All right. You guys take care. You know, keep in touch. Been fun talking to you guys, and truly stay healthy. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye.